When my own mother stood up in that courtroom and shouted that I was a disgrace, I did not cry. I did not defend myself. I did not even look at her. I just sat there, breathing quietly, while my whole life was judged in front of strangers. The courtroom felt colder than it should have that morning. The kind of cold that settles into your bones and refuses to leave. I remember the sound of the wooden bench beneath me when I shifted my weight. I remember the soft rustle of papers. And I remember my mother's voice, sharp, loud, and certain, echoing off the walls as if she had practiced those words for years. She said I was mentally unstable. She said I had always been that way. She said I cannot be trusted with my own money, my own choices, or my own future. Welcome to Auntie Rose Narrates. Before today's story of betrayal and self-discovery, please subscribe and hit like to help these stories be heard. Drop your city or country in the comments. It always warms my heart. Now let's begin. I stared straight ahead while she spoke, my hands folded in my lap. I was wearing my grandmother's pearl earrings that day, the ones she gave me this summer before she passed. I wore them for courage. I wore them to remind myself that someone, once, had believed in me. We were in the Milwaukee County Courthouse on March 14th, 2019. The date is burned into my memory. Not because it was dramatic, but because it was quiet in the most painful way. Quiet moments have a way of staying with you longer than loud ones. My mother's attorney finished speaking and sat down with a confident nod, like the outcome was already decided. I could feel my mother watching me, waiting for me to break, waiting for tears, waiting for proof that she was right. Then the judge leaned forward. She was a woman in her mid-60s, with silver hair pulled back neatly and reading glasses resting low on her nose. She had been listening without interrupting, without reacting, but something in her eyes had changed. I had seen that look before, the look someone gets when a story does not quite fit together. She looked at my mother's attorney and asked him one simple question: "Do you truly have no idea who this woman is?" The room went still. The attorney blinked. He looked at his notes. Then he looked at me, then back at the judge. And in that silence, my mother's face changed from confidence to confusion, to something close to fear, all in the space of a few seconds. That was the moment I realized something important. This was not the day I would lose my voice. This was the day the truth would finally speak for me. I was not always the woman who sat quietly in that courtroom. There was a time when I tried very hard to be heard, when I tried to explain myself, when I believed that if I said the right words in the right order, my mother would finally understand me. But understanding was never what she wanted. Control was. I grew up in a small house on the north side of Milwaukee. It was neat on the outside, with trimmed bushes and a white porch railing my mother cleaned every weekend. People used to say our home looked peaceful, and in many ways it was. There was food on the table. There were clean clothes. There were no bruises to point at. That made everything harder to explain. My mother, Elaine Carter, cared deeply about appearances. She believed respect came from being admired. She volunteered at church. She served on committees. She smiled easily in public and spoke with confidence. People trusted her. They still do. When someone like that tells a story, others rarely question it. My father left when I was 9. He packed his things quietly one afternoon while my mother was at work. I remember sitting on the stairs, watching him move through the house like a stranger. He hugged me once, longer than usual, and whispered that he loved me. Then he was gone. After that, my mother became everything in our house. Every rule, every decision, every truth. I learned early that silence kept the peace. If I asked too many questions, my mother would sigh deeply and say I was being difficult. If I cried, she would tell me I was too sensitive. If I disagreed, she would remind me of everything she had done for me. Eventually, I stopped pushing back. It felt easier to shrink than to argue Dot school was my escape. Not because it was perfect, but because it was predictable. Teachers had rules that stayed the same. Tests had answers that were either right or wrong. I did well there, very well. But whenever someone praised me, my mother found a way to soften it. She tries hard, she would say. Or she struggles sometimes, but we manage. I never knew what version of me people believed. My grandmother, Margaret Carter, was different. She lived across town in a quiet brick house that smelled like coffee and clean laundry. She never rushed her words. When she spoke, she looked you in the eyes and waited for you to finish before replying. With her, I felt seen in a way I could never quite explain. I spent many weekends at her house growing up. She taught me how to fold towels neatly and how to listen without interrupting. She told me stories about her childhood, about working long hours, about loving people who did not always love her back. She never spoke badly about my mother, but she noticed things. And she noticed me. When I was 16, my grandmother gave me my first pair of pearl earrings. They were small and simple. "These are for strength," she told me. Not the loud kind, the quiet kind. At the time, I did not fully understand what she meant. Years later, those words would come back to me with painful clarity. As I grew older, my mother became more involved in my decisions. She questioned my friendships. She questioned my classes. She questioned my thoughts. If I felt anxious, she told me it was proof that I could not handle stress. If I needed time alone, she said I was withdrawing. Every normal feeling became something she could label. By the time I was in my 20s, that label had a name. Unstable. She used it often, not angrily, calmly, like a fact she had accepted long ago. She told relatives she worried about me. She told doctors she feared for my future. And slowly, without me realizing it, that story became larger than my own voice. I moved out when I was 24. It was the hardest thing I had ever done. My mother cried when I told her. She said I was making a mistake. She said I would fail. She said she was only trying to protect me. I almost stayed, but something inside me needed space to breathe. Life on my own was quiet. I worked. I paid my bills. I learned who I was without someone watching over my shoulder. I was not perfect. I made mistakes. But I was stable. I was capable. I was free in small, meaningful ways. My mother did not see it that way. She called often, asked questions that felt less like concern and more like inspections. She asked if I was taking care of myself, if I was remembering appointments, if I was managing money responsibly. When I reassured her, she would pause, then remind me how much she worried. It always came back to worry. My grandmother's health began to decline when I was 32. I visited her as often as I could. We sat together in her living room, sometimes talking, sometimes just listening to the clock tick. One afternoon, she reached for my hand and held it tightly. Her grip was stronger than I expected. "You are stronger than they think," she said quietly. "Do not let anyone convince you otherwise." When she passed away, I felt a loss that went deeper than grief. I lost the one person who had always reflected me back to myself honestly. At the reading of her will, I learned she had left me a significant inheritance. Not out of favoritism, but out of trust. She believed I would use it wisely. That was when everything changed. My mother's concern turned urgent. Her questions turned sharper. She told me my grandmother had been confused at the end. She said the will was unfair. She said I should let her manage things for my own good. When I hesitated, her voice softened in a way that scared me more than anger ever could. She filed for legal guardianship 3 months later. I was shocked, hurt, and strangely calm, because on some level, I had always known this was coming. This was the final shape of a story she had been telling for years. A story where I could not stand on my own without her. The court papers described me as fragile, as emotionally inconsistent, as someone easily overwhelmed. None of it felt like me, but all of it sounded like the version of me my mother had been sharing with the world. And so, on that March morning, I found myself sitting in a courtroom, listening to my life reduced to a list of concerns. I did not interrupt. I did not argue. I trusted that the truth did not need to rush because for the first time, someone was listening who had no reason to believe her story over mine. And that quiet understanding was enough to keep me steady. The weeks after my grandmother's will was read felt heavier than the weeks after her funeral. Grief had a shape I understood. It came in waves. It softened with time. But what followed the will was different. It was quieter, sharper. It felt like something watching me from the corners of my life. At first, my mother did not sound angry. She sounded worried. That was always how it began. She called me one evening and asked if I had slept well. She asked if I had eaten. She asked if I was feeling overwhelmed by everything that had happened. Her voice was gentle, almost tender. If someone had overheard the call, they would have thought she was the most caring mother in the world. When I told her I was doing okay, there was a pause. Just a small one. Then she sighed and said she wished I would be honest with her. I asked what she meant. She said she could hear it in my voice, that I sounded tired, that she was afraid I was pretending to be stronger than I was. I remember sitting on my couch, holding the phone loosely in my hand, staring at the wall. I felt fine. Sad, yes. Missing my grandmother deeply. But I was not falling apart. Still, my mother spoke as if she knew something about me that I did not. Over the next few weeks, the calls became more frequent, sometimes twice a day, sometimes late at night. She would ask the same questions in different ways. If I had paid my bills, if I had been to work, if I had spoken to anyone about my feelings, if I had thought about seeing a doctor just to be safe. Each time I answered calmly. Each time she sounded unconvinced. Then she began bringing up the inheritance. She said it worried her. She said it was too much responsibility for someone like me. She reminded me of times when I had been anxious in the past. She framed it as concern, but it felt like a test I was always failing. One afternoon, she came to my apartment unannounced. I opened the door and saw her standing there with a tight smile and a casserole dish in her hands. She said she was just in the neighborhood. She said she wanted to check on me. We sat at my small kitchen table. She looked around the room, taking everything in. The clean counters, the organized shelves, the stack of mail neatly sorted. I could tell she was looking for something out of place, something to confirm her worries. She asked me how I planned to manage the money. I told her I was still figuring it out, that I was taking my time, that I wanted to honor my grandmother's wishes. My mother nodded slowly, but her eyes stayed sharp. She said she thought it would be better if she helped. She said it would ease her mind. She said she had more experience. When I gently told her I wanted to handle it myself, her smile faded just a little. She said she did not think that was wise. From that moment on, the tone changed. Not dramatically, just enough to notice. Her concern became urgency. Her questions became warnings. She started reminding me of moments from my past that I barely remembered, presenting them as evidence of my instability. She told relatives she was worried about me. She told family friends that grief had affected me deeply. She did it quietly, carefully, like she was planting seeds and trusting they would grow on their own. I began to hear things secondhand. An aunt asking if I was holding up okay. A cousin gently suggesting I lean on my mother more. No one accused me of anything outright. They did not need to. The story was already taking shape. I tried talking to my mother directly. I told her I felt uncomfortable with how she was speaking about me. I told her I was managing my life just fine. She listened patiently, then reached across the table and held my hand. She said I was being defensive. She said that was another sign I was struggling. That was when I realized something important. Every response I gave became part of her argument. If I disagreed, I was unstable. If I stayed calm, I was in denial. There was no version of me that fit outside the story she was telling. Soon after that conversation, I received a letter in the mail. Official, heavy paper, legal language. I sat on my couch and read it twice before it sank in. My mother was petitioning the court for guardianship over me. I remember feeling strangely still. Not shocked, not angry, just tired. Like a door I had been leaning against for years had finally opened, and I was no longer surprised by what was behind it. The paperwork described me as incapable of managing my affairs. It cited emotional instability. It mentioned my grandmother's inheritance as a concern. It listed examples I did not recognize as my own life. I called my mother that night. I asked her how she could do this without talking to me first. She said she tried to talk to me. She said I had not listened. She said this was the only way to protect me. Her voice did not shake. Mine did not as the court date approached. The pressure increased. My mother stopped asking how I felt and started telling others how I felt. She met with lawyers. She gathered statements. She spoke confidently about my limitations, as if she had been preparing for this moment for years. I tried to live normally. I went to work. I paid my bills. I cooked meals. I slept. But everything felt like it was happening under glass. Like I was watching my own life from a distance while someone else explained it for me. Friends asked questions I did not know how to answer. Some pulled away, unsure of what to believe. Others offered quiet support, but avoided saying too much. I learned quickly how lonely it feels to be talked about instead of talked to. In the days before the hearing, my mother called less often. When she did, her tone was businesslike, focused. She reminded me of the date and time. She told me to dress appropriately. She said she hoped I would cooperate and not make things harder than they needed to be. That word stayed with me, cooperate, as if my own life were something I needed permission to participate. In the night before the court date, I barely slept. Not because I was afraid of losing control, but because I was afraid of being misunderstood. I knew the truth of my life. I had lived it quietly and consistently. But truth does not always speak the loudest in rooms full of authority. That morning, as I put on my grandmother's pearl earrings, my hands shook slightly. I took a deep breath and reminded myself of her voice, of her faith in me, of the strength she said lived quietly inside me. When I walked into the courtroom and saw my mother sitting confidently beside her attorney, I understood how far this had gone. This was no longer about concern. This was about ownership, about rewriting my life in a way that centered her. As the hearing began, I listened as my mother's attorney spoke about me like I was not there. He described a fragile woman, a woman overwhelmed by grief, a woman incapable of managing her intense responsibly. I sat still. I did not interrupt. I did not correct him. I watched the judge carefully. I watched her listen. And as the words filled the room, I felt something unexpected rise inside me. Not anger, not fear, but certainty, because I knew that stories built on control eventually collapse under their own weight. And when the judge leaned forward, adjusting her glasses, I realized the most important part of this story was still waiting to be told. The judge did not raise her voice when she leaned forward. She did not sound angry or impatient. Her question was calm, almost curious, which somehow made it more powerful than anything my mother had said that morning. The courtroom, which had been full of noise just moments before, settled into a silence that felt heavy and alive at the same time. "Do you truly have no idea who this woman is?" the judge asked my mother's attorney. For a second, no one spoke. The attorney blinked like someone waking from a dream. He looked down at his papers, then up at me, then back at the judge. His confidence wavered, just slightly. It was the first crack I had seen. He cleared his throat and began to speak about medical notes and concerns, about reports and observations. The judge listened without interrupting, her expression steady. When he finished, she nodded once and turned her gaze toward my mother. Mrs. Carter sat upright in her chair, hands folded neatly, her face composed. She looked like a woman who expected to be believed. The judge asked her to stand up. My mother rose slowly. I had seen her like this before, poised, practiced, ready. She spoke about her worries, about sleepless nights, about her fear that I would make irreversible mistakes. She said she had only ever wanted to protect me. Her voice cracked at the right moments. It sounded sincere. As she spoke, I felt something inside me tighten. Not because she was lying outright, but because she was shaping the truth to fit her needs. She spoke of my anxiety, but not my stability. Of my grief, but not my resilience. She told half stories that leaned just enough to change their meaning. The judge asked her a few simple questions. How often she saw me, when she had last been in my home, whether she had witnessed me failing to care for myself. My mother answered carefully, choosing her words like stepping stones across water. Then the judge asked about my grandmother. She asked when my mother had last spoken to her. She asked about their relationship. She asked whether my grandmother had ever expressed concern about my mental capacity. My mother hesitated for the first time, just a breath longer than before. She said my grandmother had been confused toward the end. She said grief and age had clouded her judgment. She said the will did not reflect her true intentions. The judge nodded slowly and reached for a folder on her desk. She opened it and adjusted her glasses. The sound of paper turning echoed softly in the room. She said my grandmother's attorney had submitted affidavits. She said medical records had been reviewed. She said there were letters. My heart skipped. I had known my grandmother kept journals, but I had never imagined they would appear here. The judge began to read aloud. Not the whole letters, just parts. Short lines, simple words my grandmother had written clearly and deliberately. She wrote about her trust in me, about my patience, about my careful nature. She wrote that I listened when others spoke over her. She wrote that I understood money because I understood restraint. She wrote that she feared someone would try to take control of my life once she was gone. I felt tears sting my eyes, but I did not let them fall. The room felt smaller. My mother shifted beside her attorney. The confident posture she had held all morning began to slip. The judge asked my mother if she was aware of these letters. My mother said no. Her voice sounded thinner now. The judge asked if she had ever expressed concern about my grandmother's competence before the will was read. My mother paused. That pause said more than any answer could have. The judge turned her attention to me for the first time. She asked me to stand. My legs felt steady as I rose, even though my heart was racing. She asked me simple questions: where I worked, how long I had lived on my own, how I managed my finances. I answered quietly, clearly, honestly. I did not defend myself. I did not attack my mother. I simply described my life as it was, ordinary, consistent, mine. The judge listened closely. She asked follow-up questions, not to trap me, but to understand. When I finished speaking, she nodded once. like she had reached a conclusion she had been forming all along. Then she asked my mother's attorney something unexpected. She asked why no independent evaluation had been requested before filing for guardianship. She asked why the petition came only after the inheritance was revealed. She asked why the concerns had escalated so suddenly. The attorney struggled to answer. He spoke about timing and circumstances, about acting out of caution, but the words no longer carried weight. The story he had brought into that courtroom was unraveling. My mother stood again, uninvited this time. She tried to explain. She said she knew her daughter. She said she had lived with me my whole life. She said no one understood me better than she did. The judge met her gaze, steadily. She said something I will never forget. Knowing someone, she said, is not the same as owning their truth. The room felt still. My mother's face flushed. She began to speak again, but the judge raised her hand gently, signaling her to stop. There was no anger in the gesture. Only authority. The judge spoke about autonomy, about evidence, about the seriousness of removing someone's rights. She spoke slowly, making sure every word landed. She said the court did not see sufficient proof of incompetence. She said concern alone was not enough. She said love did not grant control. Then she denied the petition, just like that. The words echoed in my mind, even as the courtroom began to stir. Papers shuffled. People stood. The tension that had been building for months seemed to release all at once, leaving behind a quiet ache. My mother sat frozen. Her attorney whispered something to her, but she did not respond. She looked at me then, really looked at me, and for the first time, I did not see confidence or control in her eyes. I saw confusion. I gathered my things slowly. I did not rush. I did not smile. I walked past her without a word, not out of cruelty, but because there was nothing left to explain outside the courthouse. The air felt different, lighter. I stood on the steps for a moment, breathing deeply, letting the reality of what had just happened settle into my body. I had not won a battle. I had reclaimed a boundary, but as I walked away, I knew the hardest part was not over, because denying control in a courtroom does not erase the damage done in private, and I could already feel the weight of what would come next. I did not go home right away after leaving the courthouse. I walked instead, slowly, without a plan. The streets of Milwaukee moved around me like nothing important had happened, and that felt strange. Cars passed. People laughed. Someone hurried by with a coffee in their hand. The world had not paused for my pain or my relief. It never does. I sat on a bench near the river and let myself breathe. For months, my chest had felt tight, like I was holding something in place just to keep going. Now that pressure eased, but it left behind a soreness, like a muscle that had finally relaxed after being clenched too long. I thought about my grandmother. I imagined her sitting beside me, her hands folded neatly, her eyes warm and knowing. I wished I could tell her how her words had carried me through that courtroom, how her quiet faith had spoken louder than accusations ever could. When I finally returned to my apartment, it felt unfamiliar, not because it had changed, but because I had. The space felt quieter, wider. I placed my keys on the counter and sat at the table where my mother and I had once talked about money and concern and control. I realized that conversation had never really been about any of those things. It had been about fear. In the days that followed. Messages came in slowly. Some relatives apologized. Others avoided the topic altogether. A few reached out to say they had always believed me, even if they had not known how to say it before. I accepted each response without judgment. Everyone carries fear differently. My mother did not call. That silence was heavier than any argument. I knew her well enough to understand she was processing something she had never prepared for. Losing control feels like losing identity to people who build themselves around it. A week passed. Then another. I returned to my routines, work, groceries, laundry, ordinary tasks that grounded me in my own life. Each small decision felt like a quiet victory. Not because I had been denied them before, but because I now felt their weight more clearly. One evening, my phone rang. I knew who it was before I answered. My mother's voice sounded different, softer, careful. She asked how I was. I told her I was okay. She paused, then said she wanted to meet. Just to talk, I agreed, but I set a boundary. We would meet in a public place for 1 hour. She accepted without protest, which told me how much had shifted already. We met at a small cafe near the courthouse. Neutral ground. She arrived early and stood when she saw me, unsure whether to hug me or not. I chose a polite nod instead. We sat across from each other, the space between us filled with years of unspoken truth. She spoke first. She said the court's decision had been hard for her. She said she felt misunderstood. She said she had only ever wanted to help me. I listened, really listened, not to agree, but to understand where she was standing. When it was my turn, I spoke slowly. I told her how it felt to be spoken about instead of spoken to. How painful it was to have my normal emotions turned into evidence against me. How lonely it felt to have my strength questioned at every turn. She looked down at her hands. She did not interrupt. I told her something I had never said before. That her fear had shaped my life more than she realized. That her need to protect had crossed into a need to control. That love, when mixed with fear, can become something harmful without ever meaning to. She cried quietly, not loudly, not dramatically, just tears slipping down her face as she nodded. She said she did not know how to stop worrying. She said she had lost herself when my father left, and holding on to me had felt like survival. I felt compassion then. Real compassion. Not because it excused what she had done, but because it explained it. Understanding does not erase harm, but it does soften the edges of anger. I told her I was not asking her to stop caring. I was asking her to trust me, to let me live my life without managing it. I told her that if we were to have a relationship moving forward, it would need to be different. She agreed. Slowly, carefully, like someone learning a new language. That conversation did not fix everything. It was not a miracle moment, but it was honest. And honesty, I have learned, is its own kind of healing. In the weeks after, I noticed small changes. My mother asked instead of assumed. She listened more than she spoke. Sometimes she slipped into old habits, and when she did, I named it calmly. Each time she adjusted, not perfectly, but sincerely. I also noticed changes in myself. I stopped explaining my choices before they were questioned. I stopped shrinking when someone expressed concern. I learned to sit comfortably in my own decisions. Even when others disagreed, I began sorting through my grandmother's things. Old letters, photographs, journals. In one notebook, I found a page she had written near the end of her life. It was short. You do not need to prove who you are to people who benefit from doubting you. I closed the book and held it against my chest for a long time. Closure did not come as a single moment. It came in layers, in quiet mornings, in steady breathing, in the realization that my worth had never been on trial. Even when it felt like it was, the court case ended, but its lesson stayed. I learned that silence can be strength, that truth does not need volume, that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is remain yourself while others try to define you. My relationship with my mother continues. Cautiously and honestly, we are learning each other again without fear at the center. Some days are easier than others, but they are real. And as I sit in my living room now, sunlight filtering through the window, My grandmother's pearl earrings resting safely in a small box nearby. I feel something I once thought I might never feel. Peace. Not because everything is perfect, but because everything is finally mine. Still, there is one last thing this journey taught me. One truth that changed the way I see my life, my family, and myself. And that truth is what I want to leave you with. Time did not rush back into my life after everything ended. It returned slowly, like a cautious visitor. Days passed without court papers or legal language or tense phone calls. Mornings felt lighter, evenings felt calmer. I began to notice small things again. The sound of birds outside my window, the comfort of familiar routines, the peace of knowing that no one was watching my every step, waiting for me to fail. I learned that healing does not announce itself. It arrives quietly. One moment, you realize you slept through the night. Another moment, you realize you made a decision without fear. Then one day, you realize you are no longer replaying old conversations in your head. That is when you know something has shifted. I still think about the courtroom sometimes, not with pain, but with clarity. I think about how close I came to losing faith in myself simply because someone else spoke louder. I think about how easily authority can be confused with truth. And I think about how important it is to remain steady. When others try to shake your sense of who you were taught, my grandmother's pearls sit on my dresser now. I do not wear them every day. I save them for moments when I need to remember where I come from. When I need to remember that strength does not always look strong from the outside. Sometimes it looks like patience. Sometimes it looks like silence. Sometimes it looks like trusting yourself, even when no one else does. My relationship with my mother is different now. It is not perfect, and it may never be. But it is honest in a way it never was before. We speak more carefully. We listen more deeply. We allow space where control used to live. That space is still unfamiliar to her, and sometimes to me too. But it is necessary. Forgiveness, I have learned, is not about forgetting. It is about choosing not to carry bitterness forward. I forgave my mother not because she was right, but because I wanted peace more than I wanted punishment. Forgiveness does not mean opening the door to harm again. It means closing the door on resentment so you can walk freely. I also forgave myself for doubting my strength, for staying silent longer than I needed to, for believing, even briefly, that maybe I was the problem. Self-forgiveness is often the hardest kind because it requires honesty without cruelty. It requires acknowledging pain without letting it define you. The inheritance my grandmother left me changed my life in practical ways. But the greater gift was something else entirely. She gave me proof that someone saw me clearly. Proof that my quiet way of moving through the world had value. Proof that trust, when given freely, can outlast fear. I used the money carefully, just as she believed I would. Not because I needed to prove anything, but because that is who I am. I built a life that felt steady and meaningful. I invested in my future. I gave myself permission to dream without asking for approval. Sometimes people ask me how I stayed calm through everything. They ask how I managed not to break when my own mother questioned my sanity in a courtroom. I tell them the truth. I stayed calm because I knew who I was before anyone tried to name me. That is the lesson I carry forward now. No one knows your life better than you do. No one gets to define your worth without your consent. And no accusation is stronger than a life lived with quiet integrity. If you're listening to this story and you feel unseen, misunderstood, or spoken over, I want you to know something. You do not need to become louder to be real. You do not need to become harder to be strong. You do not need permission to trust yourself. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is sit still in the truth of who you are and let the noise pass around you. The world will always have opinions. Some will be kind. Some will be cruel. Some will come from the people you least expect. But at the end of the day, you are the one who lives inside your life. You are the one who wakes up with your choices. You are the one who carries your values forward. Guard that space carefully. As for me, I wake up each morning knowing that my life belongs to me. I move through my days without fear of being taken apart by someone else's story. I honor my grandmother by living honestly. I honor myself by standing quietly but firmly in my own truth. And when I put on those pearl earrings, I remember her words, not the loud kind of strength, the quiet kind, the kind that lasts.